everyone! So today, for this video, I'd like to talk about Our Lady of Lourdes and Saint Bernadette, and we'll also be discussing the Rosary. So some of the class joined in during the half term, and for those of you who have, you might want to skip this video after I tell you some information here about what else I'd like you to do this week. And for the rest of you, hang on and watch this video. So today we're going to be doing that, and in the coming weeks we're going to be talking about, let's see, I have the lost sheep, the story of the lost sheep, the saints, and the prodigal son, and we're going to be discussing those in preparation for your first confession, which is coming up in March. So, for Our Lady of Lourdes, you know that half of our parish is the Our Lady of Lourdes parish. And that church is based in Sawston, so some of you attend there. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Our Lady of Lourdes and Saint Bernadette. Okay. For those of you who've listened to this story already, you can go straight to these tasks. There are a number of videos available on YouTube, and I'd like you and your parents to search for what you feel that you need to learn more about. So, you can, if you don't know much about the Rosary, I'd like you to type in to YouTube Rosary for Kids and select some videos that you might like to watch. There's information, there are some that are the history of the Rosary and the story of how the Rosary came about, how to pray the Rosary, especially if you've never done it before, how to make a Rosary if you're interested, and then the last thing, and I'd love everybody to do this, is try to say the Rosary. So you can use a YouTube video, or you can use a Rosary book if you have one, or an app or a website that will tell you all the mysteries of the Rosary. There we pray different prayers depending on the day of the week. So if you want to do the Rosary with your Rosary bracelet or another Rosary that you have at home, you can do that by typing in Rosary and the day of the week that is today for you, that you're searching for. So if it's Wednesday or Thursday, just put Rosary Sunday, Rosary Thursday, etc., and you'll find the correct one. And in addition to that, if you like apps, the Laudate app, see if I can find it, Laudate, Laudate, as well as other apps, has the Rosary on it. So if you click on Rosary and Chaplet, they have lots of other prayers called chaplets that we use the Rosary beads for. And there's a whole list. It's going to be hard to focus and get the right light. Okay. There's loads and loads of different chaplets and rosaries. And what's interesting about these is you don't need a rosary bead for this. So if you click on the top one, it says Pray Interactive Rosary, and it shows you a rosary, and then you click on the little dot, and it tells you, I'm sorry you won't be able to read this from here, but that's okay. It will tell you what prayers to say in the right order, and then when you've done those, you press the X, and it moves you to the next bead, and you press that one, and then it says that's the Our Father, and then you press the next one, and then it's a Hail Mary, and then you press the next one. Okay, so for all of you people who like gadgets, that one works really well. So if you feel like you need to learn more about the Rosary, pick some Rosary videos, as I said, about the history, how to pray it, pray it for various days of the week, or even if you want to make a rosary, do that. And if you want to learn more about Saint Bernadette or Our Lady of Lourdes, pick some videos on that. I encourage you to do that with your parents, just to make sure that they seem appropriate and they seem maybe the right length. But that's basically going to be your homework for this week. All right, in addition to whatever the book work for this week. Okay, so on to Saint Bernadette. I'm reading about Saint Bernadette partly from this book. It's called the Book of Saints. I don't know if that's backwards for you. This is in our library system. I got it from the library in Cambridgeshire, and it has a number of different saints, and they're all about 1 page long. It's quite a good book. It goes over a bunch of different saints. But I also really like to access information about saints from the internet. It's free, it's easy, and you can get a lot of more information, which is useful. So I'll add a bit of that into my story. Okay. Saint Bernadette was 14 years old and working as a shepherd when she saw a vision of the Virgin Mary in the mouth of a cave. A spring of water began to flow, and Mary told Bernadette to build a church on the site. So this is Bernadette, and this is the church that they built on the site. So some of you may have been to Lourdes before. Bernadette saw Mary around 18 times in a place called Massabielle near Lourdes in France. At first, people didn't believe her, but Bernadette stuck to her story and won people over with her honesty and integrity. People began to flock to the area and to bathe in the water, believing it was holy and it would cure them of various illnesses. However, Bernadette never saw the visitors or the church. By the time the church had been built, she had moved away and become a nun, living the quiet, holy life she wanted. She died at the young age of 35 and was made a saint 50 years later. Today, millions of people visit Lourdes every year and pray in the church that was built as Saint Bernadette reported Mary wished. So she lived from 1844 to 1879. Her feast day is the 16th of April, and she's the patron saint of ill people. So a lot of people who make their pilgrimage to Lourdes are people who are ill, and our parish and our diocese also make pilgrimages usually every year to Lourdes, usually in August, October time, and we quite often send young people, teenagers, to accompany people who are ill because they might need help navigating the area if they have mobility issues, etc. So, but families can join in the pilgrimages as well. So that's another opportunity. Some families go on their own, but it would be really nice if you could join in one of the parish pilgrimages. So Our Lady of Lourdes also has a separate feast day, and that's the 11th of February, so that's just passed a couple of weeks ago. And our parish of Our Lady of Lourdes celebrates that in particular, and we often, either in our parish church or in the diocese at the cathedral, we have a healing mass around that time. And in honor of Our Lady of Lourdes, where we ask Our Lady to intercede for people who are ill. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a couple of things here. One, I'd like to delve like a little bit deeper into the story. So Saint Bernadette, it says here she was working as a shepherd. In actual fact, what she was doing was she and some of her friends and cousins were searching for firewood. So they went out searching for firewood, and Saint Bernadette, she was actually a really sickly child. She was so sick that she didn't really have a lot of learning. She didn't have a lot of education. She missed out on school a lot because she was just ill so often. And while she and her friends were out gathering firewood, they decided to cross a bit of water, like a river, and go to the other side to get some more firewood. And she, being a very sickly sort, decided not to and stayed on her side of the river and just, hung out there for a while, waiting for her friends to come back. And while she was there, she saw a vision of a lady. So this lady, she didn't know who she was at first, but the lady pulled out a rosary. And so Saint Bernadette, who wasn't a saint yet, Bernadette, pulled out her rosary. She fell to her knees and she prayed the rosary. And the lady, she did see her about 18 times, and the lady told Bernadette that she was the Immaculata. Now, Bernadette had never heard the term Immaculata, and most people hadn't. It was a very new concept that the priests and bishops and pope were talking about Mary and calling her the Immaculate Conception. It was a new title, a new honor, that they referred to Mary as the Immaculata. And so when Bernadette was trying to convince people that she'd seen the Immaculata, she used that phrase, and then the bishop listened and said, "Ooh, but how would she know? How would she know what the Immaculata was? So she must be telling the truth." So this is how she was able to tell her story and convince them that it was true, that she was seeing Mary. And as I said, she never got to see it. Not on earth, not in this lifetime. I'm sure she's looking down at us from above saying, wow, that's an amazing feat. So while she was talking to Mary at one point, Mary sort of pointed to the ground, and she dug in the ground, and a spring of water came up. And people go there to the spring, to where the water is, and they believe these waters are healing waters. So I'd like to talk about how we decide that miracles and healing miracles and how saints come about. So they have doctors, and they have all sorts of theologians, people who are associated with the church, who investigate all claims of miracles that happen there, of healings, people who have been healed. And there have been quite a few. There's been quite a few that haven't necessarily been investigated and claimed, but a lot of people who've been very much helped at Lourdes, and there have been a few miracles that have been documented as well. So that's quite interesting. In terms of miracles, I'd like to go back to saints. We've been talking about it over the last few weeks, and I just want to make sure that everybody gets the lesson on saints as well, in case you missed it. Okay. So saint is anybody who has gone to heaven to be with the Father, God the Father, and Jesus in heaven, right? So that means all of us are aiming to be saints. All of us are aiming to go back to heaven to be with God, right? And in the church, we have names for certain people, we assign them the name of saint because the church is so very sure that that has happened, that this person has achieved that. And it doesn't mean that anybody who doesn't have saint before their title hasn't. There's loads and loads of saints in heaven with God. And the church names some people and has decided that they're saints, and they usually wait. Here, in this case, she was made a saint 50 years after her death. And one of the reasons for that is they really investigate that person's life, what they did. And saints are not perfect. All humans are not perfect. So saints are not perfect people. They are not perfect in their faith all the time. They're not perfect in their actions all the time. However, saints have a few characteristics that are very special, and one is that they say yes to God. They say yes to what God is asking them to do, whether that's move around the world and help poor people in an unknown place that they've never been to before and they are unsure of. But they answer that call, whether that is to go and teach, whether that's to join a convent or a monastery and pray and make that their life's work, whether they don't have to be a priest or a nun or a monk or anything. They don't have to be clergy at all. Saints can be mothers and fathers and children. There are plenty of children who have become saints as well. So it can be anybody who has really followed God's call with their whole heart. And there are a few other requirements that the church requires for us to name somebody an actual saint. And one major one is that they usually have 3 or more miracles attributed to them. And this can be during their lifetime. Quite often the miracles are things like healing somebody who had a grave illness. Either they were very, very poorly or perhaps crippled in some way, disabled in some way, and were healed from that. Sometimes the miracles are, especially ones for some of the older stories, you hear of miracles where it was just a miracle that they were being chased or something, and God helped guide them so that they wouldn't be captured. And so some of those are associated with miracles. And some of the miracles don't have to happen while that person is alive in this world, but quite often healings especially happen after their death. So people might go to that particular soul and pray and ask for healing and intercession and ask that person to help heal, but also ask God to heal. And that has happened a lot. So Padre Pio is a good example of that. Loads of people have prayed to Padre Pio before he became named as a saint, and there are healings that are attributed to him, and he is of course now a saint. So all of the saints that we hear about are going to have miracles associated with them. Sometimes they are instead martyrs, and they have died because of their faith, because they refused to turn back on God. And usually in the case of maybe war or something like that. So there's a few ways to become a named saint within the church. And we normally celebrate a saint's day on the day they died. So, for instance, for Saint Bernadette, her feast day is the 16th of April, and that is most likely the day that she died, the day of the year that she died, 16th of April. This book has a lot of sort of some of our big local saints, but some across Europe. So they're quite interesting. Saint Christopher and Saint Francis and Saint David, some that you may have heard of. There's a few good books about saints. There's a couple in the library system, I think only 2 or 3, that are that have a bunch of saints in them. There's another one that I have at home, Book of Heroes. It's another one. As I said, it's quite easy to look things up, and now there's quite often YouTube videos about saints as well. So if you have a particular saint that you like, or if you're named after a saint, or you have a middle name, we did talk about names a few weeks ago. If you have a middle name that's a saint name, look them up, find out about your saint, find out about your favorite saints. It's good stuff. Right, one last thing I'd like to discuss a little bit about the Rosary. So I'm going to have you watch some videos about the Rosary. I think it's easier to watch that rather than to try to listen to me. And although it would have been nice if we were able to pray the Rosary together this past Sunday, unfortunately my internet did not work. So I'm hoping that this video itself will upload today for you all. But I'd like to talk just a couple of points about the Rosary. Just a couple of interesting things. One is that the word bead comes from the Old English word bead, which means prayer. So rosary beads and prayer beads and what we call prayer ropes have been around for a very long time. Long time, over 1,000 years easily. So the Rosary itself as we know it is about 1,000 years old, but prior to that people used ropes and they would tie knots in the ropes. And one of the reasons for that is a lot of monks and the Desert Fathers and people who set aside a lot of time for prayer during the day, they also needed to keep track of them. Sometimes they wanted to pray all 150 psalms in a day, or they wanted to say the Our Father many times, 50 times or 150 times a day. And so they really needed the knots to keep track of where they were, so they didn't lose track. And so the Rosary comes from that tradition of having beads or knots on a rope. And we have rosaries today. As I said, we have different prayers for rosaries. Usually the typical one is the one that you're going to find when you look on YouTube. It's one where we start with the Our Father, and we have the Hail Mary, and we say the Glory Be, and we say 10 Hail Marys, then a Glory Be, then the Our Father, and we repeat that 5 times, so that you're saying 50 Hail Marys during the course of the Rosary prayer. So that is our typical one, and it has a few prayers added in and out and in various places depending on which ones you like to do. So you will find some variations. If you choose a different day and you choose a different set of videos, you might end up with a few different variations of the prayers. And the chaplets, they quite often have all sorts of different sets of prayers. Some other Christian religions, like the Anglicans, they have created their own Anglican rosaries, and they call them rosaries, but they pray Lent prayers. They don't pray to Mary necessarily. They reflect on stories from the Bible and say the Our Father in between. So it's a beautiful tradition, and there are so many variations of it, and I really encourage you to find some that you like. In the beginning, sometimes they can seem very long, so you can pick a shorter one. But the other thing that I'd like to say is do persevere with it, because over time it becomes a really beautiful meditation, a very beautiful prayer. So the habit of the Rosary is a really nice one to get into. and it's a nice one to pray together as a family or with another person. So even if you just pick one member of your family to do that with, it's a really nice tradition. So next time you are looking at some jewelry and necklaces and bracelets and things like that, and looking at the beads, remember that bead means prayer. Okay, so that's quite a lot of information for one day. I hope that was very helpful, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoy learning about the Rosary and seeing where it can take you. All right.